expansion. And I come up with an estimate for the total energy requirements of the expansion just of the dust cloud that's well over 10 times the entire elevated mass of the building. That's the gravitational potential energy that is supposedly driving all this destruction. Doesn't even come close to satisfying this energy sink, let alone all those other energy sinks like crushing all that concrete, which would also probably require a lot more than the total mass of the building. And the final proof, and this one I think is also fairly easy to understand, has to do with looking at the way that the top of the south tower came down. Now it first started to tilt, but what you see if you look at it carefully is that it starts to tilt, but right at about this point, the tilting stops as it's going into the dust cloud and actually starts to right itself. That contradicts the law of conservation of angular momentum, barring demolition, because the fulcrum would have been causing it to rotate faster. So the only explanation is that the entire top of the building has been shredded, presumably by demolition, and that's what caused it to stop rotating because the moment of inertia was destroyed. So the conclusion of this is that looking at the physical evidence, showing the features of demolition, proofs of demolition, and as well as, of course, the total bankruptcy of the official explanations and the fraudulence of the official investigations, leads me to conclude unequivocally that the Twin Towers in Building 7 were all deliberately destroyed through controlled demolition that was not a result of the plane crashes and fires.
Ladies and gentlemen of the Citizens Grand Jury, thank you very much for coming back together 10 months after we first gathered in Los Angeles. It's a brave thing to come out in public these days in question of the United States government and the stories that it tells, and I commend you extremely for being here today. I think our task is also a liberating task, and in that regard, it should be a happy task and one that I think we will enjoy. And my job today is to persuade you to support the findings that we came to last October and to expand those findings and to indict 5 individuals. The first of those individuals is Larry Silverstein, who is the developer of World Trade Center Building 7 and the leaseholder for the Twin Towers, Buildings 1 and 2 of the World Trade Center complex, as well as other properties there. The second individual is Peter G. Peterson, who is also a leaseholder of WTC 7 in his role as chairman of the Blackstone Group. The third individual is David Rockefeller, perhaps the world's most well-known banker, and a partner and colleague of both Larry Silverstein's and Peter G. Peterson's in many enterprises. He is the chairman emeritus of the Council on Foreign Relations. And the fourth and fifth individuals are the Vice President of the United States, Richard Cheney, and the President of the United States, George W. Bush. Now, you'll probably notice that I said those two officials, Richard Cheney and George W. Bush, last. I did so deliberately because I think they are probably less consequential in the crimes of 9/11/01 than the first 3. And I think at the outset we should examine what the rules are in terms of justifying an indictment. Probable cause is the criterion that is before you. So I would ask you to consider these individuals, their roles, what we can gather from the information that I convey to you in the light of whether there is probable cause to investigate them further for their possible involvement in those terrible crimes of 9/11/01. So, to Larry Silverstein. Now, my great friend and co-author and one of the biggest workers I know in terms of exposing the crimes of 9/11/01, Jim Hoffman, has already shown you conclusively, I think, that the Twin Towers were demolished. My small job now is to prove to you that World Trade Center Building 7 was demolished. And here again, there is much physical evidence that makes that obvious. We've seen footage of WTC-7 collapse in a very dramatic and precipitous fashion. It, in fact, fell in 6.5 seconds, a 47-story building. That is, it fell almost at the speed of free fall. If you dropped a brick from 47 stories, it would have fallen in 5.9 seconds. So the speed and the symmetry of that collapse and its inwardness make it obvious that it is an implosion executed through classic demolition. But apart from all that, we've got the word of its developer, Larry Silverstein, that that building was demolished. Because Larry Silverstein said on a PBS documentary that was aired nationwide September 16, 2002, America Rebuilds, Larry Silverstein. I remember getting a call from the fire department commander feeling that they were not sure they were going to be able to contain the fire, the supposed non-existent big fire in WTC-7. And I said, we've had such a terrible loss of life, maybe the smartest thing is to pull it. And they made that decision to pull, and we watched the building collapse. Now, pull, in the usage of Larry Silverstein there, means to demolish. It's used elsewhere in the documentary by a civil engineer of New York City referring to what they did in regard, or were contemplating in regard to Building 6. Pull means to demolish. Now, we need to now consider what a demolition of a building the size of Building 7 would entail in terms of time of preparation. And it was very useful for me to visit a site that's up for Controlled Demolition, Inc., which is a name you should remember, a company you should remember. It was hired to administer some of the cleanup of the World Trade Center complex after the atrocities of 9/11/01. But on that site, Controlled Demolition, Inc. speaks of world records that it's set in terms of executing demolitions. And one of those refers to the J.L. Hudson building in Detroit, which was the largest department store in downtown Detroit, became, financially unfeasible with the spread to the malls and so forth. 1998, Controlled Demolition, Inc. was contracted to bring down J.L. Hudson department store. And on the CDI site, we read this. After 4 months of study by associate contractors, that it was 4 months of simply going through what they had to do in order to demolish this 35-story building of about 2 million square feet. That is a building just about the same size in square feet as WTC-7. CDI's 12-person loading crew took 24 days to place 4,118 separate charges in 1,100 locations on columns in 9 levels in the complex. Over 36,000 feet of detonating cord and 4,512 non-electric delay elements were installed in CDI's implosion initiation system, some to create the 36 primary implosion sequences and another 216 micro delays to keep down the detonation overpressure from the 2,728 pounds of explosives which would be detonated during the